Town.
What it is, folks, we back with another one, From Roots to Branches. Yeah, you seen it. You see what it is. We're talking about Negro Town. I think it's an important subject matter for us to talk about just because it dives into so many of the illusions that it goes into. Why is it that black folks believe that there was actually a place called Negro Village? And why do we always bring up these conversations of this black utopia that existed on this earth before colonization? There's things that go into why this ideology exists, but it becomes less of an ideology and more of a reality when we're talking about who runs the world and what the world actually looks like outside of the constructs of what we've been indoctrinated in. And that's what I really want to go into today. Now, Negro Town is a skit that Key Peele did, and I believe it was in 2009, 2010, maybe right at the beginning of the 2010s when all of the violence ended up happening with, the police shootings and, the rise of activism that ended up happening in the 2010s, which I believe was the awakening of us remembering truly who we were within this construct. And that's one of the things that I really want to dive into. And I want to do it in a few different layers as we unravel the actuality of this idea of a Negro town and where did it root from and what were they really trying to tell us within this skit? Because I feel like the skit itself, with him getting hit in the head and even with him having the dream, is actually more truth being told than not. And that's what I really want to dive into. So let's do it. In 1967, Harold Colander releases a book called The African, about a 12-year-old by the name of Hoshana, who's kidnapped from the Ivory Coast of Africa by French slave traders, sent to St. Lucia, then Savannah, and later escapes with the indigenous tribes of New Orleans and Savannah. In 1976, Alex Haley releases a book called Roots, and this is about Kunta Kinte. And Kunta Kinte, being also a young man, older, who has his own child, is enslaved. And within that, he has, his family that becomes a part of this American narrative that we currently talk about today. The thing about Alex Haley is one of the key components when we're talking about the current narrative of the transatlantic slave trade in the ways that we depict it today. 1976 became one of those narratives where it indoctrinated the masses with this narrative of a transatlantic slave trade in the ways that we actually view it today. Before that, there were many blacks who understood that they had indigenous roots to the Americas, and it really wasn't argued. Even when we listen to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, James Baldwin talk about how we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us, it lets you know that there's more to the story around the transatlantic slave trade and the ways that blacks viewed that in the years of the 1960s into the early 1970s and way before that. Now, the argument of us all being from Africa is now an argument that we hear from the FBA, Pan-Africanists, and Moors, and now the indigenous Americans who are now arguing about who we are within that group. One of the things that we have to do, and this is from a variety of historians, but one of my favorite, his name is John Henry Clark, is we have to go through the American history into African history to understand what we're currently fighting against. Now, what I will say is there's information and details that are out there that we're able to utilize to understand why history has been washed over in the ways that it has. Now, we're talking about the Moors. The Moors are a controversial subject because of the ways that they've actually whitewashed the Moors, or brownwashed it. The thing that we have to understand about the Moors is the Moors were not just Muslim. They were Hebrew Moors, Christian Moors, Muslim Moors. The more that we understand that, the more that we can understand the term Moor. Now, Yahyah the Negro, or the Chosen One, or El Negro, is an important part of history that we have to acknowledge that happened during the 13th century. Yahyah the Negro is understood to be a part of the bloodline of King David, the tribe of Judah, and he's the grandson of Solomon, great great grandson of Solomon. The more that we understand who Yahyah is, the more that we can actually get deeper into what happened around the splitting of the Moor ideology and who we were as Moors, the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, and the complexities of the indigenous Moors, the European Moors, and even what we call North African Moors.
It's always been Moors versus Moors before any white man. And it was never a trivial vowel war over whether the correct spelling is Muir or Moor. To believe our ancestors who function on hyperdimensional levels would waste time fighting over English vowels is idiotic and fictitious. The actual historical conflict was between righteous Moors who adhered to original customary laws and the divine creed of the Creator, and dirty Moors, gang members of antiquity who succumbed to greed and began selling out their own people. They utilized Caucasian populations who were initially domesticated as janissaries and Mamelukes within the Moorish Empire to act as agents of war against their own Moorish kindred to disinherit them by proxy. Conflicts like the Charter versus Cisco proved dirty Moors in America fell to their lower nature long before white contact. Blaming only European Moors is a lie. Many indigenous elites took $5 bribes for the Indian label, aligned with Spanish dog people to dispossess original mound builders. These elites betrayed kin and accepted slave monikers for self-protection, avoiding the Negro status they inflicted on the masses. Thus, major conflicts from the French and Indian Wars to the Seminole Gullah Wars were Moor versus Moor struggles. Righteous militia Moors fought dirty collaborators who used Roman and Union proxies to replace our organic republic with a corporate fiction.
And I know what it is. Changing it back the way I do.
The royal house of King David and the tribe of Judah were enslaved by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar II, after the deconstruction of the first temple built by King Solomon of Jerusalem, son of King David of Jerusalem, King Alfonso of Spain in the 13th century, whence we may learn, if we can believe it, that a king of Spain who had assisted Nebuchadnezzar in reducing Jerusalem brought an enormous population into Spain, all either the family of King David or from the tribe of Judah, and the royal family resided first in Seville, then Granada, adding that the exile afterwards had their numbers increased by fugitives from the desolation of the Second Temple. Under the command of the Roman tribune, General Titus, thus formed the Hebrew Negroes of Spain and Portugal, descendants of the house of King David's royal lineage, bore his grandson and the son of King Solomon of Jerusalem, Don Ibn Yahyah El Negro of Portugal, who commanded respect as a skillful warrior of the Maghreb brave. With great oracle powers and with such a command of the language, his letters were famous across Europe. He was known variously by names such as the Chosen One, Sword of the Revolt, and the Sustainer of the Empire's Glory. With his victory over the Muslim Moors of Portugal and Spain, he was rewarded his own area called Negro Village.